When was the last time that you were truly, truly grateful to science? Think about it for a second. Could have been something personal, maybe a disease in your family. Maybe it is something that has united us all, because I, for my part, have been truly grateful for receiving the COVID shot. Not only because it allowed all of us to return back to normal life, but so far in this century, it's still quite young, but it has been truly the greatest scientific achievement so far. The fastest vaccine development, the biggest treatment development in human history. And we have a lot to be grateful to science, because literally in the last 200 years, it has lifted us out of sickness and poverty into health and prosperity. I'm going to illustrate this point. I'm going to pull a little Yuval on you. I think he's not yet here, so thank God, because he may have not been quite happy with the 1-second summary of his masterpiece. Anyways, we were born as a species about 200,000 years ago. And for these 200,000 years, we were pretty much a danger of starving or dying of an infectious disease. 4 out of 10 children did not survive their first 5 years of age. Average life expectancy was not much longer than 35 years. And it was like that for 200,000 years, until about 500 years ago. And then something truly amazing happened. We learned to apply a rigorous method of experimentation to create and test our knowledge, and with that, we started improving our life conditions. That was the scientific revolution which lifted us into health and prosperity. 200 years ago, a scientific method gave us first the steam engine and then electricity, triggering the Industrial Revolution, and with it all the things that we take now for granted that make our lives simpler, easier, build the modern world as we know it today. 200 years ago, science as well started to erase famines with the invention of synthetic fertilizers. The Haber-Bosch method, synthetic nitrogen saved nearly 3 billion lives. Then Norman Borlaug came along and through rigorous experimentation created higher yield crops, saving another 1 billion lives from starvation. About 200 years ago, we invented vaccinations, first with the smallpox vaccine, 500 million lives saved. People celebrated back in the day, in the 60s, when the first polio vaccines came out. And the most recent example is, of course, the COVID vaccinations just in the last 3 years, which allowed us to return back to normal lives. But there are so many other countless scientific innovations that are improving our health conditions. Blood transfusions, for example, alone saved 1 billion lives. Antibiotics are saving lives. Anti-malarial drugs. The bifurcated needle as well saves millions of lives, and today we have brain scans and genetic mapping that is saving millions of lives every single day. About 80 years ago, scientists as well started inventing computers and then connected them to the internet. And today we have these powerful little supercomputers in our pockets, powered by artificial intelligence, accelerating knowledge creation, and with it as well dissemination at an exponential rate. It is quite safe to say that thanks to science, we today live healthier and wealthier lives than ever before in human history, in just 200 years. And this graph demonstrates this just beautifully. It is a data representation from the legendary Hans Rosling and the Gapminder Foundation, a true science hero, for me at least. So if you have never seen this data representation, then do lean back, breathe in, and enjoy it, because this is the finest that humanity has ever produced. So, what do we see here? Each bubble represents a country. The size of the bubble represents the size of the population in the country. On this axis, we see life expectancy, which is an index for the health in the country. The higher up, the healthier the country is, the lower down, the sicker a country is. On this axis, we see wealth. The more to this side, the wealthier, the more to the corner, the poorer people in a country are. So we're winding back now just 100 years ago. We're 1 billion people on this planet. And pretty much all of us lived in extreme poverty with an average life expectancy of just 35 years. But then science hits the ground and gives us all of these innovations that start improving our life conditions. So watch this. Watch the two little bubbles at the beginning. The two little bubbles at the beginning are the UK and the US. The two big green ones are China and India. We're entering the 20th century. First dip was First World War. Second dip is the Second World War. And then everybody is lifting. China and India in just 30 years, a massive improvement in prosperity and health. This is tremendous. You don't see it often on the news, but this is what just happened in 180 years, thanks to science and innovation. And indeed, this is a beautiful innovation cycle. We produce research leading to innovation, prosperity, and then governments and industries fund this money back into our research labs. This is the innovation cycle that fuels modern knowledge economies. But not all is yet well on this planet. There is still poverty, war, inequalities. And that is why nearly every country on this planet has subscribed to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We want to eradicate poverty, bring peace, prosperity to all people around this globe. And tomorrow we will have Ban Ki-moon with us, the leader behind the SDGs, who will be talking about humanity's most noble mission. This is the North Star, where we want to be within the next 30 years or so. But there's always a but. There is a challenge to this because today's prosperity is built on practices that are destabilizing the life support systems of our planet. As we grow healthier and more prosperous, we are as well destroying our forests, we're destroying our oceans, we're driving other species into mass extinction, and we're burning that many fossil fuels that we might bring the climate to a tipping point from where there might be just no return. It is so that the planet has boundaries. And if these boundaries are transgressed, life will no longer be good for us. This is a scientific concept which was introduced for the first time by Professor Johan Rockström and a college of amazing ecologists and climate researchers in this groundbreaking research paper 14 years ago. They postulated that the planet has 9 life support systems. And for each one of these life support systems, they defined exact measures that define a safe operating space for humanity. If you start crossing this boundary, you get into an unsafe zone, and if you keep on going, you will reach a tipping point at which the life support system will come tumbling down. And several of these boundaries have already been transgressed, and Johan will tell us much more about this. But I'll try to explain it to you as well, a little bit, in my own words, because I had to understand it too. Now, what does it mean to be in this blue safe zone? As it turns out, for the past 12,000 years, we have been living in a remarkably stable climate era. It's called the Holocene. And it is in these 12,000 years that we domesticated plants and animals. We settled down in little villages which grew into kingdoms. We invented scripture, writing, printing machines, the scientific revolution, modern knowledge economies of today. And we want to remain in this safe stable climate period. We do not want to flip out of this period. But this, unfortunately, is no longer a given because we have started to transgress these boundaries. The first boundary that we transgress is the one that's feeding us, that eradicated famines, fertilizers. We're now overusing fertilizers, synthetic nitrogen and phosphorus. It's running off into the waterways, polluting them, or escapes as nitrous oxide into the atmosphere, very potent greenhouse gas that is leading to global warming. This boundary is transgressed, and we now have to minimize the use of fertilizers, invent a new type of generation of fertilizers to feed the population. Second boundary that is transgressed is about deforestation, how we use our land. Forests are, in fact, the biggest, the best carbon capture technology that exists on this planet. You all know, they suck out carbon dioxide, give us the oxygen that we breathe. But when you cut down forests, you're also releasing carbon dioxide, leading to global warming. We're approaching the tipping point here, and we have to protect what is left, and we have to embark across the world on a mission of reforestation. Biodiversity, we're bleeding biodiversity at an astonishing rate. 1 out of 8 million species are already at danger of going extinct. 60% of the wildlife population is already gone. We have by far reached the tipping point here. We have to protect what is left. And finally, there is climate in itself, which defines how many greenhouse gases we can safely release into the atmosphere before we fall out of the Holocene into an unstable, unsafe climate era. The consequences of this will be, simply put, catastrophic. And I'm not going to further paint the picture for you. You hear it every day on the news, and others will maybe paint it. We are about to reach this tipping point here. And we cannot let this happen. We have to now embark on a mission of transitioning from fossil-fueled economies towards a world where we live in a net zero clean economy. And this has to be achieved within less than 27 years. This is our challenge. It's not our children's challenge. It's for us. My challenge as a scientist, as a neuroscientist, I have to contribute. The scientists sitting in this room have to contribute to this. Every business owner, every policymaker. Within the next 27 years, we have to tackle this challenge. And the extent of this challenge is actually quite massive. We are emitting 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every single year. We should be doing less, but our track record is catastrophic. It's abysmal. We've only been emitting more and more greenhouse gases. And this is where we need to get to in 27 years, and in fact, within the next 7 years. We have to reduce almost by half. This is a massive challenge. It's probably the biggest endeavors humanity has ever embarked on. And this is challenging for 3 reasons. First of all, because governments, businesses, and scientists all have to collaborate at an unprecedented scale, internationally. Governments have to commit to this challenge. They have to provide the funding because it is going to cost. Businesses have to execute these decarbonization plans, and they have to implement all of these new solutions and technologies. But ultimately, it will be up to scientists to define how far can we push the boundaries, what is safe, what's no longer safe. And ultimately, it will be up to scientists to deliver the solutions. They have to come up with it. We have to come up with it. Secondly, this is a massive challenge because it is going to cost us quite a lot, 2 to 5 trillion US dollars every single year until we reach net zero. And we have an amazing panel tomorrow discussing this transition and the costs thereof with Johan, Yuval Noah Harari, and Mary Schultz. Finally, this is a massive undertaking because we are literally emitting greenhouse gases in every single aspect of our lives, in everything. And I followed here the categorization laid out in Bill Gates' book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster. So, we're emitting greenhouse gases in the entire industry sector, literally how we're building our cities, the fabric of our cities, our clothes, our chocolates, all the things that we like, it all emits greenhouse gases. We're emitting greenhouse gases in how we plug in, how we get our electricity, how we grow our food, how we get around, and as well, how we keep warm and cool in our houses. There are solutions already out there, and some already are scalable because they're cheaper than their fossil fuel counterparts, and some will need much more science and investment. But let's talk some of these solutions right now. And let's start with the electricity sector, because that is emitting right now 27% of the annual greenhouse gases, but it could be such a big contributor to solutions in all the other sectors as well. So the objective really is for us as society to transition to 100% clean electricity and at the same time electrify as many processes as possible. You should be thinking here about electric vehicles, no more combustion engines. You should be thinking about maybe electric heating and cooling, so no more gas and oil to heat up your boilers, and about electrifying many things in factories instead of using fossil fuels to make steel, cement, glass, plastic, and so forth. Today, about 2/3 of our electricity still comes from burning coal and gas. But we already have clean alternatives in place. Nuclear power, hydropower, these are clean alternatives that have been in place for many years. And there are newer renewables as well, such as wind and solar and other renewables that make clean electricity. Now, is it even possible for a country to get all of its electricity from clean renewables? It is. And here in Switzerland, we are in such a country, but also in Sweden. Both these countries are getting most of their electricity already today from nuclear, hydropower, and increasingly wind. But it's not only possible in Europe, it's also possible in Costa Rica and Ethiopia, who are powered by water and by wind and other renewables. And other countries are transitioning very well and very quickly. Denmark's leading the way here. It obtains 80% of its electricity from wind, solar, and bioenergy, a transition which has been achieved in just 20 years. And then just look at the UK. This is where the steam engine has been invented, and it has been powered by coal for 180 years, up until the 90s. Then the UK transitioned very quickly to gas, and in the last 12 years, it has been transitioning to wind and other renewables. More than half of its energy already comes from clean renewables. Small countries can also transition, such as Jordan. Until 7 years ago, Jordan relied almost entirely on fossil fuels to produce electricity. Now, 20% already comes from clean renewables, wind and solar. And indeed, wind and solar are now much cheaper than coal and gas. And that is why there is a massive adoption everywhere. And within just 5 years, they will overtake coal and gas as the primary source of electricity. Of course, there's so much more to this. Sun is not always shining, the wind's not always blowing. We have to store all of this electricity, and scientists still have to improve the capacity of batteries and the grid systems that deliver this electricity to cities. More science is needed, more investment is needed to improve. Now let's talk about how we get around, because that as well pollutes quite a lot, starting with cars. So the biggest polluters, followed by trucks, then planes, and then as well ships. But cars are an amazing example of electrifying a process. Combustion engine was replaced with an electric engine. And if you plug this engine into a clean, renewable electricity source, we've won half the battle. We're well on our way. And this is now happening across the world. 13% of new cars sold are already electric. And in this case, Norway is already leading the way. And car makers are going to make only electric cars within just 10 years. It's a bit more difficult to electrify a plane, because a plane needs to overcome a long distance without being able to recharge. Current batteries are too heavy, don't have enough capacity to get over this long distance. But that's why aviation companies are investing in science around biofuels and electrofuels, such as these hydrogen zero-emission engines. Let's talk about the stuff that our cities are made of. How are we producing, making buildings, streets, everything? The biggest polluters here are indeed cement and steel, and we do not yet have enough scientific solutions. We need much more science, much more investment. But let's stay with the steel example and the car, in fact. A car is made of many different components, plastic, glass, but by far the biggest component is, in fact, steel. How do you make steel? Steel is made by burning coal to really hot temperatures to heat up iron together with other materials, reducing it to steel. This chemical process in itself emits carbon dioxide. The burning of the coal, the coke, emits carbon dioxide. There are some solutions, as I said, but they are not yet scalable. We could electrify the heat source, so we could remove the coal and find an electric heat source to heat up. But that requires bigger equipment, more time, is much more expensive than burning cheap coal. There is some innovation in how to make innovative new types of steel, but we need more science, and we have to recycle, much more than what we're doing right now. But if we do not find better materials to build our cities, we will have to, if we rely on steel and cement, we won't be able to emit some carbon dioxide, so we will need carbon capture technology to place around factories to suck out the carbon dioxide. This is a nascent field, a nascent science and industry field, and once again, it will require much more innovation, much more investment before it comes to scale stage. Let's talk about food. Because we are emitting a lot of greenhouse gases in how we grow our crops, our livestock. We're cutting down the forest, we heard that emits carbon dioxide. And we're wasting a lot of food, which also leads to greenhouse gases. And we will need to feed a growing population. We're 8 billion people right now. There will be maybe one or two more in the next 30 to 50 years. But we're growing in prosperity. And as people prosper, they eat much more. So we will need to grow much more food on much less land. And the crops will have to be much more resistant to climate change, because now it rains more in some parts of the world and there are droughts in other parts of the world. This is only possible with gene technology. And there's good news here. We have invested in genetics and genomics for decades already, and it has given us amazing gene editing tools such as CRISPR-Cas9, so we can produce higher yield crops. It's possible, already today. We have to cut down on fertilizers because they are leading to global warming. So what are solutions here? We have precision agriculture technology that can minimize the application of nutrients to wherever it is necessary. But ultimately, we will need new types, a new generation type of fertilizers, such as, for example, these microbes. They suck out nitrogen literally out of the air and deliver it to the roots whenever it's necessary and without harmful side effects to soil, waterways, or escaping into the atmosphere as nitrous oxide. So we have solutions here as well. Science is providing them. Let's talk steak and cows, because once again, the more prosperous we become, the more steaks we like to eat. The problem with cows is, as you probably know, is that they poop and they burp, and that is methane, nothing less. And that's a potent greenhouse gas as well, leading to global warming. But we have solutions, once again, and we have some of these pioneers sitting with us as well in the room. Johannes, where are you? You go and talk to Johannes. There you are. Artificial meat can be produced now in the lab from cell cultures, but it can also be produced from vegetable ingredients. And in fact, it's going to be a great idea to turn vegetarian. Why? Because there's no methane emissions, no suffering for any type of cow, and by far, as numerous, endless studies show you, it's the best and the healthiest lifestyle that you could ever adopt. Whether we are trying to stay within safe planetary boundaries, a safe operating space for humanity, and try to transition towards a net zero clean economy, it will all require science. And here comes the good news. There's more and more scientists out there in the world. Okay, we're more prosperous, our children go to school, we're sending them to university, and some of them, and increasingly more and more, come out as researchers. There's now 9 million researchers on this world, commanding of a worldwide R&D budget, research and development budgets of $2.4 trillion every year, and every year we're producing 4 million research articles. And there's lots of solutions in those articles, which we can measure as an ever-increasing amount of patent applications. There are lots of solutions out there. This is, for example, just a knowledge tree around the planetary boundaries. In the 14 years, you have produced more or close to 400,000 research articles around the planetary boundaries. And there's plenty of solutions inside this research. So we can produce solutions. We have all the capacity to produce these solutions. That is not the question. The question rather is, will we be able to produce these solutions fast enough? Because we're on a ticking deadline here. Or let's hear it from John Kerry.
I am absolutely convinced we will get to a low-carbon, no-carbon economy. What I'm not convinced of is that we will get there in time to avoid what the scientists have warned us of, which is the worst consequences of the crisis. If you don't reduce emissions by 45% minimum by 2030, you can't get to net zero 2050. So it's on us right now. We are in the decade of decision and of, essential production of the actions necessary to achieve our goals.
Right. And to achieve our goals, we need to accelerate the science. It's as simple as that. And as you all know, if you paid attention today in the morning, there is a very simple way of how to accelerate the science. And that is by making it simply openly accessible to everybody in the world. But this is where the bad news comes in. Because of the 4 million research articles that are being published every single year, still the vast majority sits behind prohibitive paywalls. Simply not accessible. Not even to researchers at the very richest universities. They don't have access to all of this science. Yet alone somebody sitting at a university in the global south, or a citizen or a policymaker who needs to make a policy on this, they just don't have easy access to this stuff. Innovators at companies. But we have to now accelerate everything. We need all hands on deck in this mission. Every innovator across the globe now needs to be accelerated with science made openly accessible. And here it goes again. There's no better example of this accelerator effect than the COVID pandemic. COVID made this accelerator effect of making science openly accessible just so brutally obvious. So 3 years ago in January, most of us were still not aware of the pandemic, but Chinese scientists had already sequenced the genetic code of the coronavirus and deposited it, openly accessible, to public servers. And this immediately triggered the race for a vaccine across the entire globe. As described, for example, here in this book, from the perspective of the two BioNTech co-founders, within just 1 weekend, Özlem and Ugur had read the paper, downloaded this sequence, the genetic sequence, which was openly accessible. They designed 8 different vaccine candidates. 8, within just 1 weekend, no time. And they already started preparing their teams for discussions first thing Monday morning. Don't know what you guys do on your weekends, but this is quite an amazing power couple. But they're exceptional, but not that exceptional, because the moment that the genetic code was posted online, other companies as well started racing. BioNTech, AstraZeneca, research labs across the world. Now we're back in March, we're all sitting in lockdown, and everybody is turning towards scientists. Give us solutions, give us treatments, give us vaccines. And it becomes very, very obvious that in order to accelerate these scientists, we need to make the science openly accessible. And this is exactly what happened on March 16th, when the White House and a coalition of other research organizations collected all of this research, these research articles around the coronavirus, and deposited it in one database, openly accessible to everybody, to people and as well machines. At that time, it was 30,000. Today, it's 1 million research articles just around the coronavirus. And making this stuff openly accessible, at least for a transitory while, because it's starting to close down again, but at that time, it was all made openly accessible, and it delivered the vaccines and the treatments at a pace never, ever seen before in human history. It was by far the fastest. Of course, other components fell into place, but without making the science openly accessible, we would have not saved that many lives. But what has been achieved for COVID has not yet been achieved for other respiratory diseases, killing 7 million people. Cancer kills 10 million people, cardiovascular 18 million people every single year. And just a fraction of the science is made openly accessible. Why? We don't want to save these lives? Just a fraction of the science for the climate change, for the climate emergency is made openly accessible. We cannot continue this way. Funders and policymakers across the world have recognized this. There is a lot of mandates for making our science openly accessible. The White House was the most recent in mandating this. And this is what President Biden said.
When I led the Cancer Moonshot as Vice President, one of the biggest issues I talked about was how federally funded cancer researchers were not sharing their results with their peers or the public because they wanted to have the answer. You all know it. As I mentioned earlier, we made federally funded cancer research more available to any patient, to any doctor, anywhere, for free. And today, as president, we're making sure that transparency applies to all federally funded science beyond just cancer.
And this is where we see our responsibility here at Frontiers. We're united as a community to make all of science open so that we can accelerate and enable scientists to deliver solutions for healthy lives within the boundaries of a healthy planet. That's why we're launching all of these community-driven journals around these 1,500 academic communities, closely knit communities, and aligned around the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, we have come a very long way, being today the 6th largest publisher out there in the world. Volume is important in making science open, but it is not the only thing to really truly make it open. You need scientific excellence at scale. That's why we pay very close attention to quality control at every single step of the process, which is measurable in citation rates. And here, once again, all the largest publishers now sorted by the average citation rates to the articles that they publish in the last 3 years. Frontiers is the 3rd most cited amongst the multidisciplinary publishers, the #1 most cited multidisciplinary publisher. Thanks to your efforts, to your hard work and dedication, that we are managing to do this. This can make you proud. This can make you hopeful, because these articles have massive visibility across the globe. More than 2 billion views, growing exponentially. There's literally an innovator, a researcher sitting in every single corner of the world. And these are the people that we want to accelerate. Of course, sharing our science openly on its own will not be enough to drive this transition towards net zero, clean economies. It will require so much more. It will require decisive policy action. It will require $2 to $5 trillion every year. It will require all the businesses, in fact, committing. But let's also be clear, without science, we will simply not solve this challenge. And without making our science openly accessible, we will simply just not get there on time. We're on a ticking deadlock of just 27 years. So there is no time left to contemplate how daunting this challenge is. There's not even time left to get depressed about how little time there is left. There's only time left to act and to do now. And that is as well really the reason why we decided to launch the Frontiers Planet Prize. Through our philanthropic arm, the Frontiers Research Foundation, we want to mobilize scientists across all walks of academia, mobilize them, and accelerate the scientific solutions that will give us healthy lives, but only within the boundaries of a healthy planet. And that's why for the last 12 months we have asked universities and science academies to nominate, to find their very best scientists. And they sit today amongst us. We've asked a jury of 100, headed by Johan Rockström, a college of the best, the most renowned climate researchers and ecologists, to go through these nominations, select the national nominees, champions, and today they will in fact reveal the 3 international champions. And these 3 champions will receive each a prize, an award of 1 million francs to continue their work, to keep us within safe boundaries, to expand our knowledge about these boundaries, the health boundaries of our planet. So, I'm at my end. I would like to thank you, Johan, the jury, all the national academies who have participated in this. For nominating, I would like to thank all of these science heroes that are working so hard and relentlessly to expand our knowledge and to keep us safe in a safe operating space. Thank you very much, and let's celebrate them now.